Well, good Tuesday morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily, and we've got the latest and things you need to know happening across the state of Illinois as we take a look at what happened up in Chicago yesterday with the Chicago City Council meeting and a budget hearing. Got city officials up there getting an earful from constituents, from Chicago residents. So we'll hear a lot of that. Also, election results are out. What are the next steps from the November 5th general election? And what do some of the top line numbers have to say? We'll hear from the Illinois State Board of Elections spokesman on that. So stay tuned. But up next, with Illinois in Focus Daily, we are anticipating filings yesterday on an issue that's being dealt with right now by the 7th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in the gun ban challenge. We talked yesterday about filings that were made just before Thanksgiving break, but yesterday you had another set of filings from the state defending the gun ban and the plaintiffs saying that, the gun ban's unconstitutional. Look at what the district court did. So we'll tackle that next here. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. Be sure to wake up with the headlines in your inbox by subscribing to the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. Get the podcast anywhere you get podcasts, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus on America's Talking Network. Just what kind of status quo should be instituted in the ongoing battle in courts over Illinois' gun and magazine ban? That may be something we find out here in just a handful of days. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop here with America's Talking Network. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning and get the podcast where you get podcasts. We've been tracking the gun ban litigation for, going on almost 2 years now, when they were having conversations about it in 2022. To when they ultimately, during lame duck session in 2023, voted for the Protect Illinois Communities Act, lawsuits filed in district courts on preliminary grounds, the case going all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, where they denied taking it, saying it's not ready yet. We want it on final judgment. Back to the district court just a handful of months ago, where they had a 4-day bench trial, and the district court about almost 30 days now, decided that the ban was unconstitutional and put a hold on his injunction against the law for 30 days. So December 8th will be the 30-day mark, meaning if there's not a stay from the appeals court to hold the judge's ruling against the law at bay while the case continues, then December 9th, the law will be enjoined. The state will be prohibited from enforcing the Protect Illinois Communities Act, which bans 170 named firearms, but others are saying it's hundreds and hundreds of different firearms, especially when you start working in all of the components that are banned as part of Illinois' law and so on. So yesterday, if you saw the segment, we talked about in the appeals court, the state making a filing saying that the case should proceed, ultimately saying that they need a stay. And then you had the plaintiff saying, no, the district court's ruling is right, and giving all the reasons. So that's just one element in this case is, whether or not the stay should be in place while the case proceeds. What's interesting, though, is this case has another element to it, and it involves whether or not the district court judge's ruling from last month is sufficient or if it's deficient. And we read a little bit of that yesterday, and today we have the latest filings because the appeals court said, it looks like this ruling from the district judge is deficient. So they wanted both sides to say whether or not the appeals court should remand the case back to the district court in order to get a more clear judgment. So we'll get to the filings from the state and the plaintiffs that were filed yesterday to that question. Should the appeals court kick the case back down to the district court to get a more clear answer? But before we get to that, I talked with Todd Vandermeide yesterday, gun rights advocate. He's been consulting with the federal firearms licensees of Illinois plaintiffs in this case, and he kind of gave us a bit of where we're at right now. And there's a couple of things going on in the gun litigation sphere dealing with gun bans.
Well, I think you've got two different cases. So one, Viramontes was argued a couple of weeks ago to challenge the Cook County semi-auto ban. And in the orals, the judges seemed to be hung up that they felt that the record was deficient there. Here, you've got, I don't know, my guess would be between 5,000 and 7,000 pages of a record between depositions and everything else that have been taken, that the state alone filed 3,500 pages of documents for their side of the case. And we responded to, Judge McGlynn ruling in our favor and issuing an injunction. So right now we're waiting on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals because the 30-day stay that Judge McGlynn put in runs out on the 8th, tail end of this week. So I would imagine that this week the Seventh Circuit is going to issue some sort of ruling on the stay so it's not, they're up against a hard deadline.
So we've got obviously this issue that needs to be resolved as to whether there is a stay that's going to be put in place by the appeals court to continue the district court's stay, which lifts December 8th, meaning December 9th will be the day. So we had those filings before Thanksgiving, whether that should happen. But again, we've got the separate question in this case about the issue of whether the ruling was sufficient or deficient. Let's go ahead and take a look at what was required by the litigants in this case to be filed yesterday. You've got the state as defense, and I'll just read through this for you. It's an 8-page ruling, but we'll skip over a lot of the footnotes and such. But defendants, appellants, Kwame Raoul in his official capacity at the Illinois Attorney General's office, also Brendan Kelly, State Police Director, J.B. Pritzker, Governor, submit this memorandum in response to the court's November 14th order. The court has jurisdiction over the appeal, but defendants agree that the district court did not fully comply with rules entering their judgment. The district court's opinion, however, makes sufficiently clear its intent to enter judgment against defendants on plaintiffs' remaining Second Amendment claims and to enjoin defendants from enforcing the statutory provisions identified in the final paragraphs of the opinion. In defendants' view, a limited remand is thus unnecessary. All right, so the state is saying that remanding back to the district court is unnecessary. They say, but if this court does issue a limited remand for the purpose of permitting the district courts to enter complaint, judgment, and separate injunction, it should resolve defendant's motion for a stay pending appeal, doing so, and so enter that an administrative stay while the case is remanded. So they're essentially saying, yeah, they don't think that the case needs to be remanded to the district court. We're looking at that December 8th deadline here, right? That could muddy the waters, and maybe that means the stay would be lifted if it has to get back to the district court for them to tool around with the idea of a deficient judgment. Anyways, back to the case here. The filing from the state says the case is a constitutional challenge of the Protect Illinois Communities Act, which regulates the sale, purchase, manufacture, delivery, and importation of assault weapons, large-capacity ammunition feeding devices, and other dangerous weapons and accessories. As relevant here, 4 sets of plaintiffs brought suit. Goes into the background. It says November 8th, the district court issued an opinion and a separate judgment. The court held that plaintiffs had established that the provisions of PICA, criminalizing the knowing possession of specific automatic, semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, magazines, and attachments, are unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. It thus granted plaintiffs' request for a permanent injunction, spells that out. So again, it goes into, the state saying that, give background, their position on some of these issues, but they make it clear that if the court does issue a limited remand, However, it should ensure that the remand does not interfere with this court's ability to resolve the pending motion for a stay pending appeal, either by adjudicating that motion before issuing a remand or by entering an administrative stay while the case is remanded. Plaintiffs appear to agree to such a course, suggesting the opposition to defendant's stay motion that it would undoubtedly and to be appropriate to extend the 30-day stay if such a remand were to take place. So the court should, at minimum, ensure that the district court's errors in entering judgment do not permit the injunction to take effect while this appeal proceeds. So you can again see how the state's ultimately spelling out their position on whether the case should be remanded back to the district court. Now let's go take a look at the plaintiff's filing from yesterday. This is, again, the plaintiffs in this case saying that they're submitting this because of the court's order, while the district court's judgment, the plaintiffs say, does not comply with the technical requirements of the rule. The district court's comprehensive findings of fact and conclusion of law clearly declare the respective rights of the parties. Combined with the district court's judgments, the findings of fact and conclusions of law provide final resolution on the merits. Accordingly, this court has appellate jurisdiction to proceed to briefing on the merits, notwithstanding the court's noncompliance with the rule, should it wish to do so. But plaintiffs' appellees do not oppose a limited remand for the district courts to enter a compliant judgment, should the court prefer that course. So the plaintiffs saying, yeah, they won't oppose putting it back into the district court, but it shouldn't really hold off from the appeals court dealing with this. So really, we're getting kind of, how's this going to play out? The different tracks that this is on. So this is clearly in the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals on final judgment, mind you. And the plaintiffs give some of the background of the case and where we're at right now. And ultimately, they say, although the judgment entered by the district court does not technically comply with the federal rule of civil procedure, that technical deficiency does not divest this court of jurisdiction. Rule 65D requires every order granting an injunction to state the reason why it issued, to state its terms specifically, and to describe in reasonable detail and not by referring to the compliance or other document the act or acts restrained or required. The district court's judgment does not formally state the reasons why it issued an injunction, nor does it state the terms of the injunction specifically. Instead, it provides an internal reference to its findings of fact and conclusions of law in support of its judgment. The form of judgment is technically not compliant. It goes on to say the district court's failure to meet the specificity or separate document requirement for Rule 65D does not, however, deprive this court of jurisdiction as compliance with Rule 65 and appellate jurisdiction are two different things. What matters for jurisdiction is the practical effect of the order. The district court's finding of fact and conclusions of law, which it incorporated into its formal judgments, lays out the rights of the parties, holding that Topeka violates plaintiffs' Second Amendment rights, and also delineates the scope of the permanent injunction, which covers the entirety of Topeka and prohibits enforcement of any of the provisions by any of the defendants. The judgments thus had the practical effect of an injunction on the government parties, despite the district court's failure to comply with the letter of Rule 65D. That is ample for purpose of appellate jurisdiction, so there is no need to remand this case to cure the rule. And again, they're citing different lawsuits and outcomes and precedent in some of their findings here. That said, the plaintiffs say they do not oppose a limited remand, so the district court may reissue judgments in full compliance with Rule 65D should this court prefer that course. The court certainly has authority to order a limited remand for that purpose, and perhaps doing so might narrow the issue on appeal. Plaintiffs accordingly have no objection to whichever way this court prefers to proceed. For the foregoing reasons, the court should order a limited remand or proceed to briefings on the merits. So that's where we're at right now. The state saying, we don't want this remanded back to the district court. If you do remand it back to the district court on a limited basis, please give us a stay. While the plaintiffs are saying, we can go either way. We don't think it needs to go back to the district court, and we'll see where this goes. So clearly things are on interesting tracks here. This one case, there's two different issues in front of the appeals court right now. But what's fascinating, too, is when I talked with Todd Vandermeide yesterday, before these most recent documents were released, I asked him if we know who the panel is for handling this case now.
We don't know. Unlike a lot of other districts where they publish panels ahead of time, we do not know. we don't. Obviously, Viramontes went up to a different panel. That was Sykes, Bannon, and St. Heath. That was a very different panel. So even though it was very similar subject matter to the Southern Illinois cases, it went to a different panel. Judge Wood has retired, so do they constitute an entire new panel, or do they simply replace Judge Wood, and does this comeback as a comeback case? It would be interesting. It would be interesting to have Judge Sykes sit on this panel to fill in, since she is the chief judge, and then she was complaining that the record of Viramontes was deficient. I think she's not going to have that problem in this case.
So we don't know who the panel is that's going to handle this, and which way will this go, because one of the things about a stay is it's supposed to maintain a status quo, or some of the arguments are made about, hey, if we have a stay, it's about preserving a status quo of some kind. Which status quo is it going to be? Which way should this go? Will there be a stay, I asked Vandermeide, and which status quo should be the focus?
Yes, I think there will be a stay, but I think the status quo should be that Illinois operated without a broad gun ban for 50 years. I think that is the status quo, and I think that's what the court should be looking at. You also have the irreparable harm of people being denied their ability to exercise part of their Second Amendment rights. So. But the Seventh seems to be hell-bent on upholding gun bans, as much as, they disdain the Heller ruling. They keep trying to find unique and novel ways to shoehorn in some cockamamie legal theory in order to just keep this up. Now, the 13th, we've got the Supreme Court conferencing on the Maryland gun ban case. So in a couple of weeks, we could hear if they're going to take the case or not. They could relist it, but if they do take the case, then I think that puts our stuff on hold.
A lot of moving pieces here. It's not just Illinois. You've got the case out of Maryland. You've got the Supreme Court possibly taking that up. If that's taken up, will that freeze Illinois' case? And will that happen while there's a injunction in place on Illinois' law? Holy cow, there's a lot going on here. So if you want to stay up to date on it, of course, wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Get the podcast where you get podcasts, and get the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. Yeah, thecentersquare.com. It's Illinois in Focus Daily.
You told Trump you ain't gonna blink? Well, we ain't either. You ain't above the law. And where you gonna run to when Trump pulls that Trump card out on you?
There's a 10-year prison sentence when you want to stand up here for those illegals.
That's just some of the citizens in Chicago heated comments yesterday at the Chicago City Council meeting. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. And Chicago's got a $1 billion budget deficit they're facing, with a budget that starts next year, and they've got to have a plan together before the end of this month. It's December 3rd here, Tuesday. But yesterday they had a meeting, and then they held a budget hearing. But before the budget hearing started, they went ahead and had public comments. And if anybody's been watching Chicago City Council in the past few months, if not longer, the past couple of years, quite frankly, people have been addressing the city council angry with the mayor, angry with the politics, angry with the taxpayer funding going to non-citizen migrants, angry with the proposals of more tax increases upon tax increases, and overall just upset with how the city's being handled. So public speakers, they had their chance to speak, and here's just how some of that went yesterday.
Our next speaker is Danielle Carter. So Brandon, you and all these Democratic mayors out here and governors, y'all talking about crashing out for these illegals, right? Trump, Tom Homan, make an example out this Negro right here first. Please come here first, because you know what? We're going to help you. We want a forensic
Ma'am, I would ask that you
keep
your, hold on a second, stop her time. Stop her time. Just a second. Stop her time. Ma'am, I would ask that you, if you want to continue speaking, you have to make sure that your language is appropriate, okay? All right.
Alex.
Okay, you can begin her time again.
You're going to spend our tax dollars to go, Michael Rodriguez, you said to take Trump to court to protect these illegals. You said you're going to spend our tax dollars to take Trump to court to protect these illegals if they try to come in your district. And then you said all of y'all in cahoots with each other to do it. Okay, so now we about to make y'all famous. We're going to let all y'all constituents know who y'all ratting for, that y'all wouldn't spend our tax dollars to protect illegals and to get them legal services. So that's what we're doing. That's cool, because we about to make all of y'all aldermen famous.
So obviously some of the residents in Chicago upset. That's just one of the speakers. Mrs. Lawrence, that's how she was identified, got up there to speak and talked about, harboring non-citizens.
We are the ones who pay your salaries. Salaries. Let me accentuate on that. But yet, you want to overlook us like we don't exist. Well, you're not going to exist for the next election, because there's a 10-year prison sentence when you want to stand up here for those illegals.
So, again, more of the criticism yesterday. It was resident after resident after resident, some people we've seen before, others we haven't. Somebody who has repeatedly gone to the city council to address the city council chambers in Chicago is George Blakemore.
Brenda Johnson didn't bring this doo-doo here. It's been here. Old Man Daley, Harold Washington, Richard Daley, Lady Lightfoot. This man did not bring this doo-doo in this room. It's been here. And you've been voting for this doo-doo too.
And he goes on to talk about how it's pretty prevalent all around.
This is all rigged. They're all Democrats.
And he goes on to express his frustrations with how long he says this stuff has been in Chicago.
To work. I don't think you're going to do it just holler and go red. I think you're going to have to have some strategic aims to clean this doo-doo up. This is old doo-doo. This doo-doo go back a long time. And you don't smell it now because it's dry, but you can see the results of it. It needs to have a change here. All of them are the same.
So
every one of these men.
Blakemore goes on to walk away from the microphone, making his point, but others got up there, including somebody else we've seen recently, talking more about budgetary issues, only identified as Mr. Cruz during public comments at the city council meeting yesterday in Chicago.
He and his supporters refused to give in on the sanctuary status when we've spent over $600 million on migrants this year, while Chicago is basically insolvent.
Our next speaker is David Mason.
Yeah, you remember me, Brandon Johnson, from the PBC meeting, and you know I'm standing on business. Here you are with another gritty property tax hike, trying to push the have-nots to house your precious illegal immigrants. You told Trump you ain't gonna blink? Well, we ain't either. You ain't above the law, and where you gonna run to when Trump pours that Trump card out on you? I will make it my duty to try to get my gun to perform an Operation Great Lord 2.0 in Chicago and lock all of you crooked Democrats and judges up. And it's just like that.
Thank you very much for your comments.
That was just the morning portion of the meeting. Then they went into a special budget hearing. Again, they've got to craft a budget. They're facing $1 billion deficit. A couple of weeks ago, the city council unanimously voted against Mayor Brandon Johnson's proposed $300 million property tax increase. They're talking about maybe just a $150 million property tax increase, or maybe a $60 million tax increase somewhere, or a tax increase here to help plug that $1 billion budget deficit that they're facing. And then during that budget hearing, it was a moment for residents in the city of Chicago to, again, address the city council on their concerns. You had Dennis White, who we've seen before, address the city council. Do a little bit of theatrics here.
Brandon Johnson, the good news is we got 48 days before Trump take that oath. In January, ICE gonna come in and get rid of the illegal immigrants. Here's the thing. In order for us to get these taxes, we gotta get rid of these illegals. So this was gonna happen to you. You got Kash Patel and Pam Bundy that you're gonna have to deal with sooner than later. Then it's gonna be an audit. Next, it's going to be an investigation. Then it's going to be an indictment.
Well, that's how you do it. Oh, I like that. Oh, my God. I like that. That's bad.
Conviction. That's what's going to happen to you.
So Dennis White there taking some time to get a little bit of theatrical. You had P. Ray Eastley, Chicago resident, also address the city council. And, well, she wanted to actually praise the city council.
I want to say thank you to the city council. I want to say thank y'all for voting down that $300 million. Thank you for saving us $300 million. Thank you for saying no to $150 million. And we want y'all to say no to the $60 million. You all did not get enough hand claps, enough support, enough love. Know that the whole country was clapping and proud of the work of this city council, because our mayor is embarrassing us, y'all, around the world. And you all took the power back from him to say the city of Chicago is out of the business of funding illegals. We are out of the business of prioritizing non-American citizens on top of the American citizens who go out in this cold weather every day to make money to pay their taxes.
So the comments during the budget hearing, there's one that I'll get to here in a moment, but they, of course, focused on, the tax dollars for migrants, the poor management of the city, and mayor's, approval ratings and such. But the mayor did hold a news conference after the city council meeting, and Mayor Brandon Johnson talked about how they're going to craft a balanced budget. They're going to balance the budget. He's confident that he and the city council are negotiating, putting together the details, and they'll have a balanced budget. But he said that it's dependent upon, quote, progressive revenue. And he's looking at the state, and he's looking at the Congress for some kind of progressive revenue. What, to give back to cities is ultimately, I think, where he's going with this. But here's the mayor talking more about how he says they're going to balance the budget.
The budget will be balanced. The budget will include investments. The ultimate work is to have real progressive revenue at the state level. Whatever we do in this particular budget cycle, we're going to have to do more statewide. And it's not limited to the state of Illinois. This is a dynamic that exists all over the country. And so that's why I said, by the way, Chase Redwinko has joined us, our city's comptroller. Our finance and budget team, they are rolling up their sleeves, working hard every single day, not every single day with the governor's team, but every single day on this budget, but on a regular basis with the governor's team. I've had multiple conversations with Speaker Welch, the Senate president, other state reps and state senators, talking to our congressional leaders. This is an ongoing dynamic that really requires progressive, bold leadership in this moment.
Now, remember, we did a segment not long ago about Peter Thiel, venture capitalist, saying that one way to, as he said, bring radical change to Democrat-run cities with serious financial issues is for the Republican-controlled Congress and the Trump administration to sit on their hands and do nothing, because the programs in these cities and states run by Democrats are going to need more tax dollars from the federal government. So clearly, this is going to come to a head at some point for Chicago. They're facing $1 billion budget deficit heading into the new year if they don't cut substantially and stop new programs, for instance. Something that some of the critics that addressed the budget hearing yesterday at the city of Chicago raised, including Mr. Cruz. He spoke earlier during public comments at the beginning of the city council meeting, and then when they opened a budget hearing for residents to have their voice heard, Mr. Cruz got back up there, and he shared a story about how people are leaving the city.
Again, progressive revenue policies will only fail and continue to exacerbate the city's financial woes. I was recently in Nashville with my wife 2 weeks ago, and I just randomly met 4 people who had moved from Chicago to Tennessee because of the tax burden. A number of my friends moved to Colorado, they moved to Nashville, they moved to Texas. We don't want to move, but there's really no alternative. If we're just going to continue to raise taxes, people are not going to want to move here, or people are not going to want to stay here, okay? The only way to get out of this budget crisis and insolvency is to increase the population and keep people here, encourage people to want to move here, encourage businesses to want to hire here.
Will that message get across? It's an interesting question, one that obviously we'll be tracking. So wake up with us each and every weekday morning, get the headlines with the newsletter from thecentersquare.com, and you can also wake up with us here with America's Talking Network each and every weekday morning. Plus, get the podcasts. Where you get podcasts, just search Illinois in Focus. Interesting to hear an election observer say that the 2024 general election was a normal election, considering everything that happened leading up to it, with an incumbent president saying he's going to run, to a disastrous debate, and then an assassination attempt, and then a presidential candidate says he's not going to run. You have a coronation of the vice president to be the Democrats' choice, and a second assassination attempt of the Republican candidate, let alone the 4 years of all kinds of litigation brought against Donald Trump. I mean, really just a wild news cycle for the 2024 presidential election. And I think a lot of observers will step back and say, well, this was not really normal at all. Just all the different things going on and just how tumultuous the headlines were. So to see that the state of Illinois had an election that was, quote, normal is interesting, especially, considering the increased numbers of mail-in ballot requests. How did that pan out? More people early voting. How did that pan out? But overall, what was the outcome? Go to the Illinois State Board of Elections website where you can find the election results yourself, and we'll just kind of go through this together here so that you can navigate stuff. But here we go. We got the latest news. Let's go to press room. And information for voters. Maybe that's the best place to go. Election results. All right. Information for voters. Election results. So unofficial election results. No, we want even numbered years. So we'll click here. Bring up the election results. So these are the official 2024 general election results. And you can go through and actually see all the different candidates that were up for consideration, but also the House and Senate, judicial, county, specific races, precincts, and such. So what was the voter turnout? Well, I connected with Matt Dietrich, who is the spokesman for the Illinois State Board of Elections, and, well, he kind of gave us the rundown, the numbers. Let's go ahead and hear what he had to say about the ultimate outcome.
I guess the big story that people were curious about was, what will the turnout be? And will it match the turnout that we saw in 2020? And it didn't. We had a good turnout, 70.42%, which is right about what we had in the last two non-pandemic presidential elections. So those were both just a hair over 70%. Now, 2020 turned out to be a very strong turnout election, with almost a 74% turnout, and that was the highest that we had had since 1992. And I think that's probably attributable somewhat to the pandemic and people being cooped up, you know, maybe being more aware of the election going on. But you know, the heightened interest that we all saw in the 2024 election sort of had given us hints that we might see that turnout match, and it didn't turn out to be that way. I think this turned out to be more of a quote unquote normal presidential election from a turnout standpoint.
So again, 70 point some odd percent turnout. A lot of conversation about what it meant for Illinois. Again, looking at some of the totals from the past few years here, it's the fourth lowest turnout in nearly 50 years. So 70.42, not as high as 2020. But you could see it kind of really was, right there around kind of normal, so to speak. Not a lot of activity down ballot. Nothing to really speak out that jumped out to Dietrich's eyes for down ballot stuff.
Since we didn't have any other statewide candidates other than the presidential election, there wasn't any single thing that jumped out as being particularly surprising or outstanding or anything like that. One thing I will say, though, that this election is noteworthy for, and that is we had a very high percentage of people casting votes early, going early in person. We had about 35% of the total vote cast early in person. And, you know, normally we would have expected maybe 25%. I thought that we would see a really big jump in voting by mail, similar to what we had seen in 2020, where we had a third of the vote cast by mail. And voting by mail didn't get to that level, but we did see about 19% of the total ballots cast by mail this time, which is a pretty decent growth if you consider that, you know, back in 2016, we only had about 6.5% of people voting by mail. Obviously, it jumped really big in 2020 when everybody was trying to stay in, but we are seeing the people voting more and more, choosing to vote by mail. And the surprising thing I think about this election cycle, for me anyway, as a watcher, is I thought that vote by mail might surpass voting early in person. That wasn't the case by a long shot.
Again, pretty fascinating to see these numbers now official. They proclaimed it yesterday. The Illinois State Board of Elections held a meeting and proclaimed the official totals. And again, if you go to the Illinois State Board of Elections website, you can actually see for yourself all of the breakdown of the different jurisdictions. So go to the Illinois State Board of Elections website, Google it. I think it's elections.il.gov. Go to information for voters and election results, and you'll be able to see the even numbered years where you can catch those. So what's next now? Obviously, some places have already had their, candidates who won in place. For instance, Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke is now the Cook County State's Attorney. So Kim Fox is no longer there, but you've got others. The State House seats are going to be officially seated in mid-January. You've got the new U.S. Congress is going to be seated. So a lot of things are going to be happening here. But what about the presidential election? Again, the outcome of the presidential election was in Illinois, Kamala Harris getting 19 electoral college votes, getting 54.37% of the vote to Donald Trump's 43.47% of the vote. So what happens next for the electoral college in Illinois?
The next thing that happens comes December 17th, and that's when the electoral votes, the electoral delegates for the state of Illinois will gather at the Illinois State Capitol and cast their ballots. Now, Illinois has 19 electoral votes, one for each congressional district and then one for each senator. So Kamala Harris won the electoral vote in this year's election. So our electors will go to Kamala Harris, and that's what will happen on December 17th.
But nationwide, former President Donald Trump making history to be the second president to win a non-consecutive term after he beat Kamala Harris, not just with the Electoral College, but also with the popular vote. So everything's going to be made official January 20th. After, I think, January 6th is when they actually do the congressional thing of, approving the Electoral College, and then January 20th inauguration. A lot of stuff for us to cover. In and out every day with you. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the podcast where you get podcasts. Get the headlines with thecentersquare.com. And like, subscribe, hit that notification bell for America's Talking Network. All right, that's all I got for you today. Thought I'd be able to delve into some of the concerns raised over drugs in Illinois prisons. Maybe we save that for tomorrow. We'll be tracking stuff throughout the day today, see what happens. But obviously, you can wake up with us each and every weekday morning. If you can't make the live show, where there's a pretty active conversation in the chat, you can also catch the podcast. So get the podcast each and every morning, about 9ish or so, it'll go live Central Time. But wake up with us at about 8 o'clock, where you can catch the show live. So take part in conversations with the chat group, and also encouraged to see those concurrent numbers continue to rise. So you guys are definitely showing your support by subscribing, by sharing, and by joining us. So greatly appreciated. All right, I'm out of here. Follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. X, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Obviously, wake up with us here with America's Talking Network on YouTube each and every weekday morning. It's Illinois in Focus Daily.